I needed an activity to do. I didn't know it was going to be so serious. Like I got in there and my curiosity kicked in. The job didn't sound that fun, but the environment did. The idea that, they had said nobody has done what we're doing. This is all brand new. It's a wild frontier. And that was what I thought, oh my gosh, nobody knows what they're doing. This sounds great.
Welcome, badass entrepreneurs. It's time to hear the world's movers, shakers, and difference makers spill their secrets for unlimited success. So strap in, for Badass Entrepreneurs Only begins now.
Allow me to introduce my guest, Stormy Simon. I am in awe of this amazing woman, and very soon you will be too. Stormy is the former president of the $2 billion company Overstock.com. There, she completely revolutionized their branding, their marketing, their customer service, so much so that her results were copied by just about every other online retailer on the planet. Under her guidance, Overstock was named to Forbes' list of America's 100 most trustworthy companies. Stormy is also responsible for growing the ranks of female executives at Overstock from 7% to 33%. Stormy followed her passion into the business world of cannabis, where she has been revolutionizing that industry as well. Stormy has launched a podcast called Lunch with Stormy, Liberty Lunch Addiction. I am so excited to have her here. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Badass Entrepreneurs Only.
Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, it's amazing to have you here. So very much appreciate you being here. You embody everything I love about entrepreneurship. Your innovation, breaking norms, taking risks. Do these things that you do feel like taking a risk to you?
No. I guess that's a loaded question. Yes, with Overstock, there was always risk when you're running a business and you have an idea and you want to implement something. There's always a risk with that. But I really like living my life, and I like the things where my curiosity takes me. And I think when you follow your curiosity and your reward can just be simply feeding your soul or learning about something, that there's not a lot of risk in that. Now, it's not all successful and there's mistakes like crazy along the way. But I think just following your soul, you have one life to live.
Yeah. How do you take that risk? When everything inside of you says, oh, I don't know about this, how do you move forward and say, yeah, I'm going to do it?
Well, I think every time before a big step, your cup is full. You wouldn't be considering leaving somewhere if your cup wasn't full of whatever you are currently doing. So you're, simply by considering a big step, you've already moved down a path far enough that you're ready to end it. And endings don't always have to be bad. You can cling on to all those, well, what if I'd have done something different? But you can also look ahead and just say, would my regret be more if I don't take this step? And despite all the fear and everything that accompanies it, you can grow there. Life is hard.
Yeah.
It's just hard. So you're going to have to get everything and get all your files filed to what you can live with either way. And to keep a positive attitude on that, I think is important. And positivity can include fear.
Oh, I love that. Positivity can include fear. Oh, I'm going to steal that immediately and claim that
I just trademarked it.
Of course you did. So for me, I'm always fascinated by people's origin story because I like to know where the spark began. It tells us so much about the person. And I think for you, the spark began with your mom. When you were very little, she said to you, Stormy, do something even if it's wrong. That's really strange advice for a parent to give her child. Do something even if it's wrong. How old were you when you first heard her say that?
I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I just remember her not liking it when I sat, so she would just say, you're going to have to do something even if it's wrong. You have to keep moving. And that was her point was, making a mistake is going to happen every single day. No matter what you do, you're going to make a mistake. But at least you've done something. It's all perception of what someone else thinks is wrong and what you might think is right. So wrong for a lot of people might not be wrong for me. And that's what it gave me, was the idea that maybe I make a mistake, maybe I get judged for it, but I still get to do it.
That's so wonderful. So it's 6 years later, you're 17, and you kind of followed your mother's advice of do something even if it's wrong because, like, oops, you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Okay. So you decide to keep the baby, marry your boyfriend, but I want to know what your thinking was. Was it like, damn it, my life is over? Or was it like, I can still live the life I want, even with a child? Like, where was your head at?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, my parents didn't talk about the birds and the bees. So that was one place they talked about be yourself, you're super smart, you got all these things that you can expand on, but we're not going to really talk about sex. I get pregnant. First of all, I thought I was old enough to do this, which is a really interesting thing to look back on at the 17-year-old Stormy and how much I've learned since then. But I didn't think for one second that my life was over. I had people telling me that my life was over and how much I was going to miss out on. But I think what that did was propel me to make sure I didn't miss out on anything. But, I never felt like having a child would ruin my life, especially when you hold them and you're like, I love you so much. There's just no ruining possible at that point.
It's so interesting to me, Stormy, and it's such a good message for my audience. People will tell you all kinds of things, right? Out of their own fear, right? Because that's what people were saying. And once again, you defaulted to your truth, which is no, like it doesn't have to be that way. And the other thing that happened, which is the rock of your life, your hero, your father, he dies. And then shortly thereafter, your best friend in the world, your sister, she's killed in a car accident. This is a gut punch to your world, right? They just sort of crumble. And you said this in an interview, which is, I love, you said, that's where I found myself, like in all this grief. So what did you find, Stormy?
Well, you realize there's a moment in your life that you realize you don't really have control. It's not something you can't control at all. You're done being a kid. Real life is coming at you. And life isn't all roses and you're not special. And there's something powerful in accepting that. There's something in accepting that you get to release a little bit more. And so I think that's what I meant when I said I found myself, is I had to learn to let go and accept things, those experiences that presented them that were interesting enough and fun enough that I could advance myself professionally while my personal life healed or reconnected, while my wires rewired. And see, if that makes sense.
That's so important because it goes to show that you can turn pain into productivity, right? You can turn struggle into something where you're actually using it to become a greater version of yourself.
In the cycle of life, you would normally lose your parents first. Yeah. So I think we're all equipped and prepared, and it's the worst thing ever, but you get through it. Losing my sister was the prime example of do something even if it's wrong. It would have been really easy for me to not do anything. But, you have survivor's guilt. You have all kinds of stuff that enters your head, and it would be easy to live there. They're super heavy anchors and something comforting in holding on to them.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, though, if the reason that you didn't just sit around and feel pain is, I think it's partially because of this unconventional life that you're determined to live. Like, that's what most people do. Most people would sit around and be in pain, but I'm Stormy Simons, right? So I'm going to turn this pain into power. Do you think that's just part of who you are?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd like to think that everybody has that within them. It's not something that goes away. I could think about my sister now and just wonder, like, what would it be like to have coffee with her? And what would we be doing as older women now? But instead, what I hold on to is the idea that we did have coffee on a porch before. And I do know the things that she said. And I hold on to those. And I'm just so like, I get the chills. I'm so lucky to have had her. And that's the gift. I did have it. You don't have to lose that memory, that feeling of connectedness. You can keep that.
So now it's the early 1990s. You have a job that you love, and it's your boss's birthday. You ask him what he wants, and he says that he wants you to perform a sex act on him. Now, this is something a lot of women have had to deal with. Most women would have gone to HR or quit or tried to ignore it. But I want to know what went through your mind when he said that as to how you were going to handle it.
Well, I'm glad that you're asking this question because we have to go back to the 1990s. Sexual harassment comments, innuendos in the workplace was not out of the norm. And you had to accept it in order to keep your eye on your job and not have to sit and worry about whatever,
Right.
just get tied up. And what does that mean? It just wasn't the same as today. So it's kind of expected. I just navigated it, right?
But what went through your mind when he said that? Was it a spark of fear?
No, it wasn't fear. I mean, I knew that I was never going to do that I knew there would never be any type of sexual anything. I knew that 100%. Okay, that's part of, working as a woman in the early 90s. And I can't even imagine before that, but that was just part of a day.
I think that you had to send a very clear nonverbal message that both it wasn't okay and it's not shaming, right?
Yeah.
Because if you send a shaming nonverbal message, then it just amps it up, right?
Very true. Yeah. And then you get caught up in some back and forth that just, we weren't going to fix the issue in the 90s and there wasn't anywhere to go fix it with.
So moving forward, now you're in your mid-20s, you start jumping from career to career. Did you ever think in any of these jobs, maybe I should just stick here because I might fail if I try something else?
No. In fact, my parents had the same jobs for decades, and that scared me. But I would be at a job for about 3 years, it seemed, before I think something else would come up. And I think, I'm so curious as to what that is or how that works and what that might be. And I would jump to it.
Right. And you're moving towards living this life that really is an exciting adventure.
I want every day to be that, even if it's not. Like, I want it to feel like there's something magical about it or something unique to me about it, to where it's not like someone could come in and live my life. It's mine now.
People have asked me, like, if you could go back, Dan, and change anything from your past, what would you change? And I think that's the way that you see not just your present and your past, but your future too. So why avoid it?
Right. Don't anticipate being rocketed forward. Like your rocket is going every day. I just focused on my career. And I love it. I love everything about it.
So thank you. In 2001, you go to a temp agency, right? And this temp agency says, we got a job for you in e-commerce. And you say, great, what's e-commerce? And even the temp agency was like, something in the internet, right? And so they send you out on this interview. And what was it like to go and interview for a job where you really didn't know what the job was?
It was super fascinating. The first interview was pretty exploratory as to like my background and what I did and trying to understand what they did. And then the second interview was with the CEO, Patrick Byrne, who was the founder of Overstock. Then I really got an idea for like what was going on. It was probably the first real entrepreneur that I had sat in the room with. So then I got the job on that second interview that very day.
And that's really important because you go on these interviews and you're not thinking, okay, is the money right? What are the benefits? You're waiting to get kind of touched, right? To have your heart and your enthusiasm spun up.
I needed an activity to do. I didn't know it was going to be so serious. Like I got in there and my curiosity kicked in. The job didn't sound that fun, but the environment did. The idea that, they had said nobody has done what we're doing. This is all brand new. It's a wild frontier. And that was what I thought, oh my gosh, nobody knows what they're doing. This sounds great.
And so
That's
you're
right.
working at Overstock and you think it's cool. So you kind of try the system out, right? You buy something online. Mhm.
Yeah.
And you get that experience like that we've all had now of the box showing up on your doorstep, right?
Yeah, it was the moment where I saw that retail could change.
Mm.
Like I didn't get it until that moment. Like I always thought, I'll
Oh,
always go to a store. I need
yeah.
to go to stores. I have to go to stores. It's just a creature of habit. But it was the moment where I went, oh, this can work. Like everyone's going to love this, you know?
Yeah. And so you're thinking, right? Like, let's change the way America shops, right?
Yes.
You have this global, universal thought about innovation and change, but you still don't really know what this business is all about, right?
Right. Well, no, but yeah, nobody knew what it was. We're just like, hey, we'll get some stuff and we'll sell it and we'll see if people buy it. And then we'll try to do it at a good price and all of those things. But no, it wasn't determined. It wasn't even called e-commerce then. It was e-tail.
But
Yeah. And so it was early days.
okay, but you're still having this thought of like, we can revolutionize something, even if we don't know how to do it, right? And this is
Yes.
key for my audience because so many people stop when they feel like they don't know how to do something, right? Like, oh, I'd love to do that, but I don't know how to do that. Like, how do you think that you move forward into something that you don't know how to do?
Step by step. I mean, every second that you apply towards doing something that you don't know how to do, you actually learn how to do it.
Hmm.
And, you're closer every moment. But in that particular case, we were creating it, which I think, for me, nobody knew how to do it. So
Sure.
I put my idea out there. And again, going back to if you see a job that needs to be done, maybe it's just your job. And being able to think about things and then bringing them forward and saying, hey, could we do this? And the world around me going, you know what, we could do that. We could try that. And that just fed my soul. Like the idea that things were working or that whiteboard was so clear.
Now it's 2003 and Overstock is working on a national branding campaign. And like somehow you're in this branding meeting. I don't know how, but
No, I brought it up. It was all so we weren't
Okay,
working
great.
on the
So
campaign.
you call the branding meeting,
The
right?
branding idea was mine. Yes, that was I had watched all these .comers on TV spend their money like Life Minders or something was one of them where they put these words on it was a ridiculous commercial. We spent $4 million on the Super Bowl ad. What'd you do today?
Right, yeah.
How terrible. All these .coms weren't advertising on TV because they just said, oh, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And I thought, why wouldn't it work? First of all, we weren't going to do a crazy TV commercial like that.
Mhm.
We do one with purpose and meaning. And so, yeah, I called the meeting.
Right. Okay. And so you say, here's our slogan. Have you discovered the secret of the big O? Now, clearly, this is like a blatant sexual reference to the word orgasm, right? And they
You
say
could take it that
yes,
way.
right? This conservative
wasn't that
Utah
easy, but
company.
yes,
How did you get them
eventually.
on board with this?
Well, the first thing I had to do is I had the idea for the commercial, and it was often where I would have an idea and then they'd say, well, go look for other alternatives. So I had to engage 5 advertising agencies and pick their best pitch and run it alongside mine. So there were 6 ideas on a list. The board did not know which one was mine and which one was someone else's. And we went through the 6 ideas. And at the end, they said, well, we love to discover the secret of the big O. Internally, between the idea and the board meeting, I did get some feedback that was like, oh my God, it's orgasm. It's this, it's that. And I just say it's Overstock, but that's how it got through.
So you're producing this national TV campaign, right? And you decide to star in the national TV.
Well, okay,
campaign.
wait. The Discover the Secret of the Big O was done by a different actress. So later on in our Overstock evolution, I did become the spokesperson. That may have been like 2006, where we started talking about the internal, like bringing ourselves forward as the brand because we were online. It's a cold environment. You never really talk to anybody. And so it was like, let's push ourselves forward so people can get to know us a little bit.
Gotcha. And so the commercial takes off and it grows the company. And it creates a tremendous amount of success. And they say to you, hey, we want to make you the VP of branding. But instead, you said, no, I want to be head of customer service. Like, you just learned how to do branding. What made you want to do customer service instead?
Yeah, I took the job as branding, the VP of branding. But what happened was when we had the commercial, we grew so big that all of our systems were like going to break. Actually, they were on the verge of breaking. And I started digging into what the customer experience was because they were coming in groves. We brought all the traffic to the site. They started shopping. What's happening next? And that's what led me down that path. And then through looking at the technology that we had and what we were getting ready to move into, which we had spent $2 million on a system to move into for our customer, our CRM, I actually didn't like it. And so I wanted to be able to get my arms around it and do something different. And I did get that opportunity.
Right.
And we did change it. So I started at a $2 million deficit because I didn't want to do the technology that had been proposed.
And the cool thing is, in customer service, you said, hey, let's call it customer care. Right?
Yes.
And
out
then
of frustration.
Everybody starts calling it customer care. Right?
Yeah.
Weren't you like a little pissed off that everybody stole your idea?
No, I was kind of honored that it happened. It was like we were sitting in a meeting and people were going, well, we have to get them to do sales. We have to get the customer service agents to pitch something or, get that last item in their shopping cart. And the truth was we really didn't have to do any of that. We needed to care for them. And so by changing the name, I thought I will change the habits. It'll give it a new, fresh start. And that I was super frustrated at the moment that it happened. And I said, we're going to call it customer care and that's it. And so it took all of their arguments as to what we should be doing off the table. And then when people started using it, I thought that's a pretty good nod.
And that's a really beautiful way of thinking. Rather than saying this is mine, it's like a little like giving birth, right? Like I'm creating this beautiful thing and sending it out into the world, right?
Yes.
So now it's 2007, right? You've had enough customer care. You reinvent yourself again, right? You take over the marketing department, but that's not enough because 6 years later, you become president of Overstock.com, this $1.5 billion company, right?
That's right.
Were there any just like, I'm in these departments, that's fine, but to become president of the company, am I pushing my luck?
I knew that company like the back of my hand, and I didn't move on to marketing. I actually kept customer care and took it with me. I kept branding and took it with me. I didn't release a lot of jobs as I went along. By that time, I had also left marketing in 2011 and then went on to do operations and open warehouse space and do some other things in the supply chain and technology that gave me even a broader scope of, what I had my arms around. So becoming president was a natural next step. I never sat and let the impact of what that meant wash over me. It was more about, taking the company to the next level, getting that next step through. And I knew at the time I was the right person to do that.
You've worked with a lot of people have worked for you. Do you think that you experience self-doubt like most people do?
Absolutely. But I think I internalize it a little more. Like I think when I'm on the playing field, you're going to have to run the ball no matter what. You're going to get handed the ball. You can't just stand there. Someone's going to knock you out so hard. And I'm talking football. So you have to get the ball down the field. Now, I think when you're on the field, every business book, and I haven't read many, but would go out the window. We were big Bears fans and my dad always used those analogies. But when you think of Mike Ditka giving a play, he's never stepping out on that field to run it. So he can say, do this. But then if one guy gets loose, an offensive lineman or something gets loose, you have to adjust while you're on the field. So, my goal was to have the smartest people around me to balance my self-doubt or the things I didn't know. But I doubt myself every day.
Like, what are the negative messages that get stuck in your head?
Oh my gosh. Like now it's about like e-commerce and should I have stayed in e-commerce? What would I have done there? But I gotta say, all that happened with COVID. Like the idea of the world stopping for me was never something I would have ever conceived. I was always going to go a million miles an hour. So only now do I sit and reflect. But self-doubt over decisions, I think, is more where I rely. I think about, I don't like it. I don't like those thoughts. I hate thinking about the past. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, I guess those questions of if I did the right thing, or I don't dwell on them long. It's just these thoughts that come in, but self-doubt into your next decisions are, I think, normal and healthy, but you still got to do them.
What is it like for you to move into self-doubt and through it and beyond it?
I think there has to be some part where you care less. You have to care less what people think. And you also have to care less about your self-doubt. Like, I've lived a spiritual life since my early 20s and all kinds of, feeling good books and all the goodness. And so in those senses, I pull back on some of those things that I know. Like, wait a minute, I'm not being in the moment. I'm just sitting here grinding through like self-abuse. I would leave someone if they spoke to me the way I've spoken to myself in my head before, right? I would leave them quick. And so just those moments of clarity where you're like, whoa, I'm in a negative mind pattern.
People will often say, oh, I just want this. I want this great thing. I want this great job. What they don't understand is the life that you're living right now, you are genetically geared to hold on to that, right? Even if there's a better life ahead, it stirs up fear. And so if you're not clear with stepping into fear, if you're not practicing stepping into fear, you actually won't create the life that you want because subconsciously you're afraid of it.
That is very true. I mean, I like being in an uncomfortable zone. I like those like feelings of like, wow, I don't really know what's going to happen. And that's exciting to me. But it is about pushing back, pushing against it, and then like allowing yourself to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But, we have to accept all of this shit that life throws at us.
But you have to accept the shit that life throws at you. How do you do that? How?
I mean, it's so funny to go full circle, but it's like you quit trying to control it all.
Yeah.
Like, I said it earlier, we're not special, meaning all of us are equal. We can do special things. We might have a special, unique talent. But when the world looks at it, when COVID looks at us, we're equal. When the universe looks at us, earthquakes, hurricanes, car accidents, all of that, none of us are too special to have to experience that. And that's where you got to give yourself a break. Like, just find the one person whose life was just so good beginning to end. And then you have to move forward. Like, you can't not love yourself enough. You have to love yourself enough to accept every mistake you've made. My God, be gentle on yourself. This is hard. This whole thing that we do every day is so hard. And if you can't hug yourself at the end of the day, there may be nobody else left to hug you.
Mm-hmm.
And even that's okay, because you've still got to dig deep enough to stand up, hug yourself, give yourself the respect you deserve, regardless of what you have done. It doesn't matter. We hang people in this society for these 5-second moments that they have, or an infidelity that they do. That's not your ultimate judging. That is never going to be the day, whatever judgment day comes, that is not your judgment day. Your judgment day will come from your soul. How you treated yourself. Did you love yourself? Were you good? Because if you do all those things, you will be good to people.
And if you do not love and appreciate the process, then the process will devour you.
Yes. And you can even hate the process. Like you can, like, in those moments where you're like, I can't get out of bed. Like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay, then don't. Let yourself have it for a little bit. But eventually, you've got to work it all through. Like, why am I feeling like this? Maybe I should just binge watch Netflix for a week. That's okay. Like, those are okay moments. It's your body. I always say, oh my God, my body's got to recharge. I got to recharge my battery. That's why all I want to do is watch, binge TV for a second.
Well,
but I appreciate those moments.
Yeah, and maybe you just got to recharge and move in with your mom and watch TV and get a temp job because you can end up being president of the company.
That can happen too.
Right. And so I do want to close the book on that story because it's such a great ending to the story. You did one radical, stormy last thing with Overstock.com. What did you do?
I don't know.
You quit.
Oh,
You quit, right? You had everything that everybody thinks that they want to be happy, right? You had money, you had recognition, you had status, you had power. What was missing that made you quit?
I don't know that it was what was missing. It was a lot of what had happened. I'm never a victim. I don't like being a victim. I don't like thinking of myself as a victim. So when things get to be a certain way, I move on, and I moved on. But was I 100% happy? Probably not. But more than that, I had been there 15 years.
Yeah.
I did love Overstock. I should always say I was happy there. I mean,
Sure.
of course, we created that baby. That is my little baby. I loved it. But there was more to do. Like there was a whole other life on the other side of those doors. And I knew what the next 10 years would look like had I stayed. The CEO at
again,
the time,
convention, right? Like if you can predict your future, that's not the future that you want to live.
not necessarily for me. Yeah. I mean, I think there's safety in that. And that's what makes the world so great is we all have different motivations. But I did know what it looked like. And the CEO at the time had offered me chairman and potentially CEO, but I knew what that looked like too.
Sure. And, and maybe it's not so much that you moved away from Overstock as you moved towards something else.
Something completely different.
What do you think that you moved towards?
I went into cannabis.
Right. And so actually, I'm going to push back a little bit on that one because I don't think it's just that you went to the cannabis industry. I think it's what the cannabis industry represented for you. Like when you started with Overstock, it was the Wild West, right? It was uncharted territory. And so was the cannabis industry when you started. I think that's what you wanted. It's like, let's do this again.
Yeah, a little bit. It was interesting because of the amount of work I put Overstock and how I had really forfeited my entire personal life. And I mean, forfeited all of it. That wasn't because they made me do it. That was the way I worked. I wanted to experience at the end of a prohibition, the discovery of plant medicine, the science that was going to be able to come, and then states specifically getting ahead of the federal government. Mind blowing, right? We've just never seen this in our lifetime. And I was extremely curious as to what that looked like. How would that feel in a legal state? I wasn't ready for the type of commitment that I had made to Overstock within the cannabis industry. So I was very wide open, eyes wide open to the experience. So I walked in and worked in a grow with 2 medicinal dispensaries in Denver. And that was a real gift for me, actually, as to where that took me on my path and the adjustments that happened. And, potentially another DNA changing moment.
Yeah. And again, I think you're looking at it as what can I create here? It's so wide open. There's so much I can create. So much innovation I can bring, Stormy, is that the things that you do, some of them shouldn't work, but they do because you break convention.
That could be, within the industry, I did a hodgepodge of things and I never really committed to any of them or becoming an entrepreneur and starting my own thing. I look at these past 4 years as the 4 years, 17 to 21. Where I was a mom and I've been a mom my whole grown up life. And then these past 4 years, I've really gotten to explore things without deep commitments, with like commitments committed to learning, committed to understanding, committed to helping someone, but really kind of this grown up area and time that I could just explore me along with that. And I feel really lucky to have been able to time out and do that as a grown-up. And also in an industry that I do have a passion for, that I think is groundbreaking for us as medicine, that I think the federal government has suppressed us on, that I actually have passion behind the actions that have accompanied this plant for the past 100 years, or it's not even that long, which is what's so horrible. But, what that's really done to us as a people in society and prisons and Black and brown people and all the things that this plant actually exposed.
Yeah. Is that what you love about the cannabis industry? There's so much that you can do in it.
Yeah, well, there's so much we haven't been able to do in it. There's a couple things going on in the cannabis industry. Like there's plant medicine. There's the pioneers that got us there, right? There's farmers and agriculturalists, people that were making medicine as the plant as medicine before anybody said it was a medicine, right?
Mhm.
Just some folks figuring it out, which is a beautiful thing. There's also the suppression, people that have been put in prison that still aren't free yet, nonviolent crimes that have really targeted Black and Brown people, which is horrific. And then there's the third piece that happened rather quickly. So when I joined in 2016, we had Colorado and Washington as recreational states. Fascinating, right? Just a fascinating concept. Well, the big money came quick. I thought there would be a few years of, people kind of working mom and pop in their state. And the multi-state operators came in quickly, a couple $1 billion thrown into these different groups, which is full of paperwork when you're operating on something that is not recognized by the federal government in a state by state level. It's so fascinating, so complicated, and so much bureaucracy that I was looking at like, oh, maybe I'll get a little license somewhere in one of these states and start being, dispensary. But I was set back on my heels every step of the way in this industry as how fast that money came in and how really dominant it was towards, and I say this, but I have 2 white sons and you're a white man and I love you, but towards the same type of businesses and the same type of boys club that we had seen in every other industry.
Sure.
And that was super disheartening to me. Now, women in the cannabis industry have held more of executive roles or leadership roles or entrepreneurial roles than other industries, but it's still really predominant here. I mean, it really is.
What attracted you to get onto the board of High Times magazine, which is like porn for potheads?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, what I had viewed High Times as, was when I first became familiar with the cannabis plant, it was the one place you could go for information. And it was rebellious and, pushing a movement forward single-handedly, right? They had this magazine for 40 years. And I had known the previous owners of High Times, Michael Kennedy, who was their attorney, and I believe like one of the founding members. I was still on the board at the time, and I was 5 years before I joined their board. I met them while I was still with Overstock. And so I had an affinity towards them, but I worked really hard to get on that board. And High Times was purchased in 2017 by an outside group and got to know them and then got on the board. But that was something that I wanted to do.
And why did you stay for only 9 months?
Well, I stayed on the board for 2.5 years. I became CEO in January 2020 and left in May of 2020, where I resigned as CEO, both that and on the board. We had different mindsets. What I envisioned High Times to be in during this very tumultuous time of uprising across the board, I felt like there was still a hand to be played there with something that was so forward thinking. We had different mindsets as to how it should go. The current owner is the executive chairman, and it's his company. I learned that at Overstock. When it's their company, it's their company.
Yeah.
And that's an okay thing. You have to decide are you okay with it if you're going to work there and be there? I had different ideas of what I wanted to do with my time, and I loved it. I loved the magazine and everything that it represented, but they're moving in a different direction than I wanted to move.
I see.
With that brand. But it's not a bad story. It's an empowering story for me. Like it's one of those moments where I got exactly what I wanted and then went, wait a second, is this exactly what I want?
Right. I mean, again, you defaulted back to your truth. And Stormy, that's such an important message. And it's wonderful. That message reverberates throughout your entire career. Because I have seen so many entrepreneurs get off the track of going for what they think they want. Oh, this will make me happy. And they lose that finely tuned sense of what's right for them. And it's really beautiful that you never lost that, or if you strayed from it, you found it again.
I have never thought about it until today. You're a really good coach.
Thank you.
I hadn't thought about it until today where, maybe that is a theme of my life. But I do, I'm not a person that makes a vision board and says, this is what I'm going to do for the next 3 years. And part of that has been, what if I don't? Will I feel like a failure? There's so many unknowns. Like I knew I couldn't control things since my early 20s. Like, am I really going to get stringent in a path and think that's the path that's going to make me happy and then not pay attention to all these other things that might make me happy?
Right.
And I think that's where, it'll work for some people and not for others. But getting what you want, by the time you get what you want, is that what you want?
No. And
You know?
I want to go on record here. I hate vision boards. Right? I will never make a vision board or ask a client to make a vision board. And should you make a vision board, I will ask you to throw it away. Because what will truly fulfill you in life cannot be cut out of a magazine and pasted to a piece of foam core. And certainly you know this, right? I mean, you have lived a life of going for the intangible. And
Yeah. And I feel like, never losing sight of being a welfare mom. I'm a welfare mom just as much as I'm a president of a $2 billion company.
yeah,
I'm both of those things. I can't be one without the other. To me, they're ingrained. So, what if happiness wasn't about your next rung on the ladder? What if it wasn't about like another 10,000 followers on Instagram? But what if it was about whether or not you're happy? That's a different question, and one that I, think about a lot because I get caught up into both worlds. Like, oh my gosh, am I fulfilling everybody else's dream of me or their expectations of what I should be doing? Am I doing that? The answer right now is probably not. But is that my happy? Like, is my happy fulfilling other people's expectations? Because I've heard it all when I left Overstock. Like, nobody does that. How come you couldn't go and eat home? Why would you walk away? I don't know why, but I know when my heart's happy. That's what I know. And I know it every single time. And that's where I like to gravitate to, even if it doesn't make the most fiscal sense or sense to outsiders.
yeah.
I kind of have to go where I have peace with my heart.
And, it's funny because if you ask anybody and say, does money buy happiness? They will categorically say no. But they're like, no, money doesn't buy happiness, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. Right?
Well, here's the thing with money is no, it doesn't buy happiness, but it makes room for happiness. And anybody who says otherwise be lying, because I can't tell you how much happier I am to not stress about the light bill or Christmas or car insurance.
Yeah.
And that's what happiness, that's what money gets you, is the idea that life is not a panic. And being the welfare mom, $300 a month.
Yeah.
To 300,000 a year, that level of calmness is the greatest gift we could give to people. If we could make it to where they just knew, like, hey, you're going to be able to make your rent this month, you're not going to lose your home. That is a gift I wish I could give to every human being, every mother.
Yeah.
Just the idea that your basics will be taken care of, and then let's watch them fly. Then let's see them find their passion. It changes your mind shift. It really does. And so I would say there's a piece of happiness that can come with money because there's room for you. There's room for passion. There's room for not stress and scary.
Right. And thank you for saying that. Like, okay, I'm not happy now, but once I have a lot of money, I will be. I've seen so many people become so distraught with the fact that, oh crap, this wasn't what I thought it was. And so, like you said, enjoy the journey, right? Because when you're there, you're going to look back and say, man, the best part was not having a full bank account. The best part was this whole thing getting there, right?
Yeah.
And so let's talk about where you are today. Because look, Stormy Simon isn't just here for her health. She's not just here to talk to me. Something's going on. How did you decide to run for office?
Well, so cannabis played a big piece in that. When my eyes were open into some of the things that our government has done and the way it works. And I wanted to know more. Utah has some legislative law where we, the voters, the constituents, can vote on a proposition or a referendum. And then whatever we vote, they can adjust. They can compromise it and do what they think is best. So the people that adjust it are the same people that propose the propositions. So if it's not the prop they want, don't propose it. But don't waste our time as voters telling you what we want so you can then adjust the law to have it be whatever you'd like. And they've done this a few times. One time was with cannabis. One time was with a Medicaid expansion and gerrymandering. I don't like that. I pay my taxes in this state and my vote matters. And the other thing is, cannabis has had such a stigma placed on it for so long. And yet, these are some of the people that have pushed forward what is so important to our society, which is plant medicine, plants, which we all have access to, and medicine, which has been suppressed for so many years because we create synthetic medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know what's right or wrong. I just believe in the earth. And I do think our government doesn't even approve health food stores, vitamin supplements. Like, these are things we should be approving, we should be researching, and we should be telling you for sure, without a doubt, does lavender affect your mood? Does it help calm you if you have anxiety? Why can we not know this? Because our government says we're not going to study that. We're not going to let the FDA approve it. Same thing with cannabis. When you meet people whose children have cancer and their results improve because of the application of cannabis in whatever form they use it, and then you have a government that says, that's illegal, something doesn't jive.
Yeah.
There's something not right there. And I want the government to say, we're going to explore it. We're going to research it. We're going to make it accessible. We are going to take these miracle cases and we're going to make sure that everybody has access to something that could prove to be a miracle for some. And it already has for some. So that's what really started me down this path. And so learning, how does a state make laws? You know, we are powerful as states. Cannabis has shown that. So there's some power in your zip code. If I choose to live here, under what rules is that going to be?
Right.
Who are these people making my laws? And why not me? I look nothing like the people on the Hill today. I look nothing like them. I probably don't think much like them. I'm not sure. Maybe they think like me and they do something different. But, you know, I really am about pushing progressive ideas forward in fairness and equality. And I don't believe in privatized prison systems for profit, things like that.
But you know, Stormy, like, they're going to come after you, right? Like, I mean, anybody who steps up for change, the people who don't like change, and that's most people, unfortunately, they're going to come after you and just, you know, go through your life with a microscope.
Well, and that's ridiculous, isn't it? And that idea that everything we've ever done has to come to the forefront because we're in politics and there's something special about it. I just call bullshit. It's a job. And you go do your job and you do it well, and then you go home and be with your family. Though that judgment drives me crazy in politics.
It's super clear to me that you get inspired by inspiring other people.
Yes. Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and what a great thing to wrap up on here. Well, Stormy, do something. Even if it doesn't work, do something. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today, for sharing your wisdom with my audience, for giving so much of your heart and your vulnerability and your truth, because that is where change happens. If people want to connect with you, and they should, how do they do that?
I'm Stormy Simon on everything. I'm Stormy Simon everywhere.
Thank you, Stormy, for being my guest, for being so vulnerable. And I want to thank you, the listener to this show. Hey, one last thing. If you're feeling stuck in business life, wherever, download my book, Jumping the Gap, Kill Your Story and Take Action. In this book, you'll see how the stories that you tell yourself are stopping yourself from living your greatest life. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to this number, 213-409-8366. 213-409-8366, and text the word GAP. It's a short read, it's fun, it's easy, and if you hate reading like I do, you can grab the audiobook. It's at that same link. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to 213-409-8366. You'll love it. All right, that's it. Go out there and be badass today.